Hi Kai,
Hi, everyone. How are you?
I'm okay. How are you?
I'm doing good. Not too bad. Not too bad.
Good, good, good.
Can you see that okay?
Yes.
All right. So I love the idea of the double-sided catapult, and I love the idea of what we're thinking about, like when we're thinking about objects and intimacy, and the idea of like attraction, repulsion of these things kind of working together. So one major problem that I'm having just in the digital universe is the spring is really difficult to get right because like the actual coil spring. So there's ways that we can do it where I could possibly like fake it to where it's
Hmm.
not actually like springing as much as the catapults are going. Here, I'll just go ahead and hit play. Um, oh, by the way, I just I connected some flags to the rocks, which I thought was really funny. um, so like we could, there's opportunity to do a lot of really fun things with it. But so yeah, so what I like about this format is like they kind of like spring like that quite a bit, which is fun. But having like an actual coil that like responds that way would be really hard to do digitally to get it right. I could like fake everything. So as opposed to being it on this like natural simulator that it's doing, I could like, just like make it and like have a spring like work like that way. But it wouldn't have the kind of like organic bounce to everything. So there's like a little bit of an obstacle there, but it's not the biggest deal. It's just kind of like comes down to how we would want to make it work. Um, but then I don't know. I was also thinking conceptually, like about how we were talking about place and location and intimacy and like alienation and things. And I was thinking about the idea of like meteors again too, and the idea of like harnessing something that's so distant, but something all on the earth that we all share and can all kind of collectively see from such a far point away. And I like the idea of like these launching meteors and thinking about like you could even attach flags to them and put anything on them, and like we could like write messages on the flags or like anything. Like there's so many things that we could do with that, which I think could just be fun. And then there's also like the potential that we could we could launch anything, so we could put different objects in, we could assemble different objects that we'd like to like all launch out together or something. The one thing that I don't know how you feel, and I think I also kind of in the sketches that you showed earlier today, the only thing that I don't like about this right now is just like this actual base part, like just the bottom, just because it's like really basic. So I think in one of your sketches that you submitted, it almost looks built out a little bit more to like where there's a structure to it. So that's like one thing I think we should potentially think about changing. Um, or there's another kind of fun thing I was thinking about this too is like there's kind of this weird like absence in the middle here, so it almost reminds me of the idea of like a magnet like that can't ever touch, or so like maybe there's something we could even think about putting in the center of it or something as well, like some type of like black hole or something weird like that as well. um but yeah, so that's kind of where things are. We can also like think about like framing up like how things would work and operate and animate. So this is like a camera revolving around it that kind of shows how they're all colliding and working together as well. And then the last thing I just want to kind of really briefly mention is we get into the rendering phase of things too. So like once it's all actually modeled, we could think about like what type of texture we want it to have, or like what we want it to look like, where we would want to place it. But you can kind of get a sense of like what it's starting to look like after it's been like rendered with like texture and material. So we can make it gold, we can make it wood, we can make it whatever. I just kind of threw on some standard textures that I had. And the background is just, don't worry about that. That's just for a lighting thing. But so there's a lot of options if we ever wanted to make it into some type of video or stuff too. Um, so there's quite a few things to think about, but it's been really fun to think about, like, because I really like the concept of this whole project, and then I really like the format of it. But then also, that's what we've kind of seen earlier is like that's just one format and one conversation, because you also have like some awesome sketches too to think about as well. And like we could build those out, or we could think about some are digital and some are physical, or some are just metaphorical, or some are just described. I don't know. There's a lot of really
Yeah.
cool things.
Yeah, I mean, first of all, your concern with the spring,
Yeah.
it doesn't really, I don't see it as a problem, as in, I think the spring is suggested in the movement.
Right.
Like as
Right.
an object, it's really clean. It its intention is to shoot two things apart, and it
Right.
does that.
Right.
And what you've done, I think, with the flag is like adding another layer or something that we can write something on it. So that's also something really interesting. Although the object by itself, the meteor being thrown,
Mhm.
is could be already like a metaphor
Right.
or a symbol for something.
Right.
However, that extra detail of the flag made it more fun um, and it gives us other opportunities. Um, I, I- yeah, I think it's great. It's really impressive what you could do in a short period of time. And like to it's like when I think of these ideas for machines and constructions, I always try and imagining them doing this kind of movement in my head.
Right.
But now I'm seeing it for real, so like for in digital ways. So it's also very very yeah, it's very fun for me. Uh,
Cool. Great. Great. Great.
so yeah, and I'm glad that uh, we found a common ground on which to keep on thinking. So um, yeah. So what I've done so far during this week, I since we agreed on this whole metaphor of things being thrown apart, I also continue doing some more sketches. It was like an exercise of freeing my mind or trying to take this idea to the limit or try to find other modes or ways of how to express this idea.
Mm-hmm.
So and I don't know if there is something you that strikes you that we can continue building upon, or we can keep our current format, as in the double catapult.
Right.
But what I've done is I've thought of different ways or different catapults. So I tried to, in a very basic line drawing, I tried to put this down on paper. So these are this
I
is
love
like
these drawings.
yeah, this is like the same. It's like part of my process. Like I sketch things down on nice paper. This is like A3 size, and uh, I think they're like almost artworks by themselves, as in their drawings.
Right.
But I was just literally every idea that I had, I was just putting it there. So um, I was trying to think of different ways of projecting something or having a projectile. And the projectile for me in this case was always the human figure or the human being. But that could change. I just thought that by doing this human figure, um, it has this comical aspect to it, like I don't know, like from Looney Tunes or something like that.
Totally. Yeah, it takes it to like a cartoon thing. Yeah, absolutely.
Yes, yes, but it also gives the object scale.
Yeah. Yeah, that's
So
really important.
even for the sake of the drawing, it gives it scale. So you could see it's a larger object that could relate to the body. However, the body part, the body as the object to be the projectile, isn't necessarily the that is replaceable. So I think my first let me see. This isn't my first drawing. My first drawing was this one.
Mm-hmm.
So I started off with what we had left with last time, and the question was like, what is our projectile? And I don't know if you can see it on the top uh,
Yeah.
left
Yeah.
corner. So I said, okay, let me start off with this, and then on the other side, on the right hand side, there is like another modification of it, where the two objects would stand next to each other, and instead of facing again, being apart, but sitting next to each other, and then um, being lifted apart. And another note is like on the bottom left hand side, there's like there's a question mark on the spring, and it's quite interesting that you had problems with the spring,
Yeah.
and
That's
the
funny.
question that arose was like, how and or why is the tension created? So if we take this idea of tension, um, we could elaborate on seeing the structure as a metaphor for our situation, and for this residency having existing online. So how is the spring, or this the idea of the spring, the tension, and the tension is what is it exactly? Is it that we cannot travel? It's like I saw the possibilities of identifying parts of the catapult as metaphors, possibly. So and there was another alteration of it, opposing directions whilst facing each other.
Hmm.
Um, but these are all like really quick, not quick, but just something that I had to sketch when I had the idea, and to see if it is good or not. This was the second drawing that I've done. Um, so the first one is like the same thing, but instead of a spring, a weight, but it didn't really contribute anything. The one below it is like a slingshot for humans. So another way of um, throwing something. Then I thought of a cannon, a dual cannon, like things you would see at the circus, but
Love that. That's hilarious.
um,
I like
the
an
one.
uncomfortable seat too, by the way. It's a nice detail.
Yes, that's the like it was part of the process. I didn't have really ideas at that time, as in one way of getting ideas was like, okay, let me focus on one aspect of it. Let me try and do something with a bit more detail. And then things just came along. Like then I said, okay, what if we could have um, this catapult for humans, and each side had an activation lever, then that they would shoot each other. So it would be like a game, who would shoot each other first, and it's like a game of trust or distrust, or so I said, okay, but I'm adding something else now. So there's like this aspect that these parts of the catapult could be added or subtracted. Uh,
That's wonderful.
and I think this is the third one.
Yeah.
Or let me see. Yeah, this is the third one. Um, so here I did a small catapult or slingshot, um, and it was like another alternative of the catapult, but this is like two slingshots that are attached to each other, and if someone would hold it, it would like aim at the other one holding it. So it's like a performance, like one person holding it and one person holding the whatever they have in the slingshot, and the opposing person is doing the same thing. But this isn't really I don't know, maybe it's not in line with our idea. The other one is like the one on the right hand side is like another catapult, but with big bows for a for a catapult. So it's like another medieval method. And then the bottom part, it says fly. It's like projecting something into the air without a real horizontal direction. And the next one is, for some reason, I thought of the swing, of two people on a swing, that they swing and eventually they launch out of it. And but I also gave them parachutes on over here, um, so they would land safely.
Just in case. That's funny.
And then another thing that was interesting, I combined the mousetrap and the catapult. So it's like a mousetrap catapult on the bottom right hand side.
That's really funny.
So, but it's a double catapult. So
That's really funny.
yeah, this is like I was like, okay, if Kyle can do it. I was trying to imagine these kind of things happening in digital space.
That's really funny. That's so funny. I love how some of the, just as an observation, I love how some of them have the option of, like, so there's like the opposite directional aspect, but then there's also the option that like you can turn around. So could you go back to like the slide before it with the slingshot? So yeah, so like I love how like that one has opposing directions, but there's like no reason why two people couldn't get on one side and like unify and go out the other, right? So like there's like this really strange menacing thing where it's like, technically speaking, you could face each other, but technically speaking, you could also not, you know, like there's like the option to do that. I feel like some of these, like maybe half of them all have that as well, where it's like, you know, you can oppose each other or you cannot, which I think is really, really fascinating. I love that. But I also like, I don't know, I think from where we are, and at least like as an initial point of like building that original catapult, I almost kind of like the design. Maybe it was the first slide that you showed where they're not necessarily like this, but they're like this, you know, where they're like almost side by side. Yeah, right. Because there's something where it's like you kind of almost are in the same space together for a moment, and then
Yes.
that, right? Like as opposed to like, so there's like an intersection or a crossover, and then there's not, which I think kind of conceptually becomes really, really pretty fascinating.
Yes. It's like that space, that temporary space that they are next to each other.
Right. Yeah, exactly. Totally. Yeah. So I don't know, like when we're thinking about like metaphorical devices and how these all kind of come together, like there's something wonderful about kind of like occupying that even for an instance and then knowing like then it's just gone. Yeah. And I also like, I know that we're still like really in the preliminary phases of this, but I'm also really excited about like even looking at like your hinge diagram of like thinking about that and like really building in those details to make it, you know, it's like with digital stuff, it's like you have to convince people that it's that there's a sense of realism, even if it doesn't end up looking real. And it's like the more like detailed structure that you put into it, the more like you accept it as being a reality in a way, which I think is really fun. So I like that. I like seeing those like diagrammatic structures of how things are. But then also in that's like what you, I think you like totally mentioned super correctly, is like there's something really funny about the idea that the spring was the problem, and like that's the thing that like is the thing that creates the most tension and the most, you know, like dynamic quality of the whole thing. Like that's what the whole thing rides on. But like that's the thing that's becoming the most difficult thing to simulate in digital space, which I think is really
Yeah,
funny. So it's
it's
like
very
doing
interesting that this tension is the problem
yeah,
towards for all of this.
yeah, totally. So it just yeah, it's funny because we either like we try really hard to like make it simulated, or we just recognize that there's like this impossibility of it, and so we substitute it with something else, or we just leave it out altogether, or we like invent our own spring, or you know, like there's some type of anxiety producing thing. It's funny because it's like it makes me think it's like I want to write a list out of like all of these like things that cause tension and anxiety in my life because of this moment, and like that would be the spring, is just like this like bottle or vase of all the things that like hold this together, you know, like that's the thing that
Yeah.
winds it up or something, which I think is pretty funny. So there's so many questions to like. First of all, I think any of these would be wonderful to make, you know, like also make digitally too, and I'd be totally into making more. But then there's also the question of like, do we want to um, like everything, like the environment that it's in, the textures and the colors, like there's so many like options that we can put into it as well. So yeah, I don't know. There's a lot of possibilities. This is the difficulty. But I don't know, like I don't know how you feel about it, but like for me, I would like to make the catapult a little bit more structured, or like rethink about the structure of it and like get it to the design that we both really like. And then I'd also like to maybe even think about making a couple more of these things too, either digitally or physically. And then I don't know. I don't know how they all exist, whether it's like a video of multiple ones just showing them in action, or if it's a more like indirect way of going through it. But yeah, there's quite a lot of options to go forward.
There are yeah, I think we can think about it during this week,
Yeah,
and maybe we can maybe write to each other and figure out a way forward, because like today we just showed each other what
right.
we've done during this week. So maybe I think we should contemplate a bit on these ideas,
Sure.
and I think that should be our work for the following week.